Good morning, everyone. Let take this off. Is that working too? Yes, it is. So good morning also from wherever you are remotely connected to this second day of the MiC conference 2021. So we're going to open it up with a very, very important part of our conference, perhaps the core of our conference. And I have to say, first of all, you have had the guided tour of the museum yesterday. So you've heard about these kites. You know what they're for. 1901, Guglielmo Marconi decides to try to cross the Atlantic with radio waves. And everybody said it was impossible. It was totally impossible because when you're at a great distance from the antenna, the wave travels like a ray, and that ray would be lost in space. Nobody knew about the ionosphere, so nobody, not even Guglielmo. But he believed in this intuition, even though everybody said it was impossible. Went, built this transmit station in Cornwall, and built the receive station in Canada, in St. John, Newfoundland. But it was December 1901 in Canada, very cold, very windy. So the trellises, keeping up the antennas, collapsed due to the wind. But he believed in his intuition so much, even though everybody said, you're crazy. And he brought the antennas up with kites. So the kites were the receiving method, alternative use of the kites. That's how the antennas were kept up. And on December 12th of that year, the radio communications across the Atlantic were open. So today we are welcoming Vlad Glaveanu, that you all know very well. So I will not say that he's the head of the psychology department of Webster University. I will not say that he's the head of the Webster Center for Creativity in Geneva. And I will not say that he also works in Bergen. So as a collaboration, international collaboration. But I will say that I owe a great debt of gratitude to Vlad, because he's not only a great researcher, but he's also a leader. And he's leading the field in many, many different ways. And he has written some papers that has inspired my own work, starting back in, I say, 2015. So thank you for that, Vlad. And today, it's an important day because Vlad is going to open up a new discipline, the discipline of possibility studies. And since we are in the home of the possible, I think this is a good place to start.
Thank you, Giovanni. Thank you for the kind introduction. Thank you. A word about the mask. Do we talk with mask? Because it's my, yeah? Oh, thank you. Sorry. Getting very warm. Thank you so much. So Ed, I have a very ambitious talk in many ways, presenting a whole field that I'm very happy in this room I have. Oh, here it is. Thank you. That's good to know. Technology, not always my friend. So I'm very happy to be here. Obviously, this is already making the impossible possible, being able to be here and to see all of you. So it's an ambitious talk, and it's kind of a very positive, uplifting topic. And I thought, well, when we get together finally for an in-person conference, I think it's good to have that. But you might be wondering, of course, about the broader context, you know, we live in. And in many ways, we live in an age of impossibility. I mean, I'm not going to stand here and read all these numbers. They're really depressing read around COVID. And we might be wondering why we talk about the possibility in this period. And in many ways, we talk about the possible precisely because we live through such an age, perhaps. Of course, I've added more calamities to my slides, just if you're not thoroughly convinced that we are in danger. So of course, on the back of the pandemic, we have the climate emergency. We have talk of how perhaps we as humanity have passed beyond the possibility of repairing what has been done. So that is also quite depressing news. And finally, something that is closer to home for me as a social psychologist, I'm very much interested by misinformation and of course, concerned by the rise of populism, nationalism. So our societal fabric is also damaged in many ways. This is just a graph I found. To be honest, I couldn't, the other graphs are from Nature and Science and so on. This one came from BuzzSumo, so I just will trust them there. But to my mind, it reads, it kind of rings true. The fact that nowadays, as we know, people consider to take, as a news outlet, social media, and we notice more and more there is engagement with misinformation rather than actual information. So it's all relatively depressing. And as creativity researcher and researchers, and maybe as possibility scholars, I'll try to convince you in a moment, it is exactly why we should be doing more. We're talking about this broader context. And luckily, we have a lot of initiatives that have been popping up across the world. This is just a little sample of things that people have been engaging with. The future comes up again and again. We're so concerned with the future. Of course we would be in any circumstance, but I think even more in this day and age, we're very concerned with the future. How to imagine the future, a BBC program. A lot of institutes are being formed around the future at various universities, from Edinburgh to other places. The ISA is the International Sociological Association, so different disciplines are starting to form research groups and to be concerned with futures research. And also UNESCO, right, in education, that's really one of the big topics on the agenda. How can we think of the future of education? And so on and so forth. Now, in my own trajectory, maybe some of you know, I'm a sociocultural psychologist. I study creativity from this very interactive, distributed, collaborative kind of angle. And I haven't always studied creativity. I'm going to give you a little bit of glimpse of what I did before when I did my master's study. But how I came personally to the topic of the possible is by reflecting on what drove me to study creativity. At the end of the day, it was this amazing kind of opportunity for us as individuals, as groups, to perceive and to enact new possibilities in our lives, in the lives of other people. So that really brought me to the topic, and I'm going to share with you a project. It's in my master thesis dissertation in London back many years ago. I started by studying children's drawings. So in many ways, it's not really unexpected that I ended up, where I am now. But it was a project that wasn't about creativity. It was about how children engage with the public sphere. So imagine going into schools, 7 years of age, 10 years of age, kids, and asking them, okay, the Habermasian public sphere, do you think? No, of course, we didn't do that. So what we did is we went and asked them to make drawings and to make constructions, and for a visiting alien from Mars to give us a snapshot of how their life is there on Earth, where they live. So we collected, it was a big team, a big effort. My supervisor was coordinating, Sandra Shevchelovich, this project. And we collected data from many countries. There is even one article that came out, and there is a book chapter. So if anyone is interested, I'm happy to share the research on that. We collected data from Germany, Romania, Brazil, and in every country, we chose two sociocultural contexts. So we chose a more affluent context and a more deprived context. I'm giving you all these details to tell you that when I did my study in Romania, I did data collection. I chose to work with children in schools. That was a bit more the affluent context, and with children in an orphanage. Now, if you know a little bit about Romania, probably you know about vampires and so on, but also maybe some of you remember how after the fall of communism, there was this big discovery of how children had been seriously mistreated in orphanages. So there is a big history, a very problematic history with these centers in Romania. Of course, things have evolved much more, and my interest was to understand how children who live in an institution of care that is kind of halfway between a home, a private space, and a public space. I was a visitor and I could come in and work with them with the ethical approval and all. I was interested to see how they understand their world. So long story short, I'm just presenting to you very briefly one construction that one of the children did that really, really stuck with me. So I wasn't studying creativity at the time, and I asked them, okay, build something that is your world. And they had plenty of material to do that. And I said, okay, are you in this depiction, right? And many times they were somewhere in the story. This kid put himself twice, and it was the only child who did that. And it was, is there a BIM here? No, if I press this, is this a BIM or is gonna turn it off?
Try it.
Try it. Oh my God. Okay, no, I have to go back. Okay, wow. Even I scared myself there. That is amazing. Okay, I'm gonna just like a cat stay here with this for the day. So do I even see what's here? Yes. So we have the kids here in the it's a bit too amazing almost. So we have in the corner, in the bottom corner, we have the kids at the center playing football, which is part of the reality of their day. And then we have him grown up. You see, I can't control myself, and having his own family. So it was really a projection into the future. It was a story of how he and his brothers, because they were all at the orphanage, they would grow up and each one would have their own house and they would have their own rooms and they would have families. It was a very, very touching story for me. And it was a story of resilience in a way, of the role of the imagination in building up some resilience. I don't want this to be sounding over romanticized and thinking, oh, that's perfect. You know, they're so resilient, they're gonna succeed in life wonderfully. There's much more that needs to be done. But for me, it was already an intuition of how when you ask children, when you ask anyone about their present state, they immediately project also into the future. And for as harsh as their life conditions were, and our conditions are nowadays in a different way, we do think about the future. We engage with the future. Now, more of you probably, if you hear my name if you ever looked up my name, you probably saw eggs coming, and that was really kind of my defining project. This was my PhD. So in my PhD, I went directly for creativity, and my question was about the relation between tradition and creativity, and basically fighting this old assumption that they oppose each other in many ways, right? So what I thought is that why don't I go against the grain, and instead of studying, you know, the big creators, well, Marconi, for instance, which is a lovely study that needs to be done, what if I study anonymous creativity? No one signs an Easter egg unless they, you know, they are very kind of, full of themselves in some ways, but no one signs an Easter egg. There is a kind of a collective creativity happening in the case of tradition. So yes, these are Easter eggs. I can tell you many, many, many things about them, but I won't. I just want to bring up one schema from my PhD, again, quite some time ago. I didn't revisit this schema for a long time, but I think, you know, looking back, it connects again to my interest in possibility. So when you have an Easter egg, I'll have to go back just to show you how beautiful this is, but also to point to the fact that there is a certain order. This is a Romanian Easter egg. Some of you who know a little bit, that you might think it's Ukrainian because there is a tradition, you know, circulating in Eastern Europe. And you see the egg has a kind of a belt, and it has different motifs, obviously, that have different meanings to them. And my question was, I was using subjective cameras. I was looking at the way they decorate from a first-person perspective, you know, recording their actions. And what emerged was that there is a path of decoration that is quite logical. You know, first of all, well, we don't even see what's at the top there, but I guess you have to wash and prepare the egg, I'll assume. But then you have to draw sometimes in pencil because it's quite hard to draw in such a shape. So you make yourself a little motif. Then you put first the main lines, then the details. It all sounds quite logical. The belt, the girdle is kind of drawn either on the on kind of the bumpier part of the egg or on the other side. Anyway, the point is that what I discovered in my data is that no one followed the logical path, obviously. I mean, you can abstract it, and on the whole, you can think, okay, well, these are the steps. But everyone did it differently. And not only depending on their style, but depending on the egg. They would tell me, I look at the egg, and if it's kind of, you know, more round in that way, I can't draw the belt like that. I'll have to do it like this. But I have to take the egg. I have to see the egg. So for me, this was really from then an intuition of how creativity, and now I would say possibility, is intrinsically related to every action we do. Even the most habitual forms of action have a space of possibility around them. Every movement, every act of decoration, everything put on the egg creates a new space of what might happen next. And you have options, even in a craft where most people would think, well, it's pretty mechanical. I mean, if you have a motive, you just follow it. They never follow the motive. You know, of course they do in the big kind of appearance. But another wonderful quote from my PhD, I remember this woman saying, if you asked me to do two identical eggs, I couldn't do that. It would take me the biggest amount of effort. I need to change something every time, right? So it's very human to change, to explore new possibilities. Finally, more recently, I went online like all of us because we live partially online or almost fully online now. And I became very interested by internet culture and memes. And again, as a sociocultural psychologist, of course, memes, you know, they're cultural artifacts that get produced and circulate. I wrote a few papers on kind of the creativity of memes. I'm happy to share with you as well. And I was interested by how people online make sense of what is happening, which is a very creative act, the act of interpretation. What is happening to all of us, right, at this moment? And more particularly, I was looking at the type of memes, because memes can do many things. They can be funny, they can inform, they can misinform, but they can also offer a social critique. I was very interested by how memes were used by different online communities to be critical of what was happening, of the government. So for instance, you might know this template with the dog in a burning house. It's really one of my favorites, time to reopen the economy. And then I noticed a lot of creativity in the way people throw new perspectives on the situation. So this is one of my favorite ones. Maybe you've seen it circulating. The average American, for the best way to tell if you have COVID is to cough in a rich person's face and wait for their test results. So of course, in Europe, some of us will think, oh my God, what's happening in America? And we often do, but this is not obviously just an American story. The thing for me, you know, as a creativity researcher is I marvel always at the capacity we have, and especially in online communities, to surprise each other and to bring new perspective to an old problem. You always look at reality in new ways if you go online and search for memes. And then sometimes you get angry and depressed, and that's fine as well. But you know, they can be extremely, well, it can be hilarious and creative and surprise us in many ways. Okay, so 3 little stories, and the kernel of possibility comes into them. So thinking through, and this might be my confirmation bias, kind of rewriting my life history, but you'll play along with me. Thinking through the many types of different works and different questions I had, they do relate to creativity, obviously. But at the end of it, they relate to something a bit bigger in some ways for me. And this is my fascination with how, as human beings, we live these amphibious lives in which we exist in the here and now, in the present. You know, we are all physically here. We listen to each other, you know, but we also daydream or think about the tiramisu we'll have later. One of my favorite, you know, on this occasion being in Italy. So we always experience the world as it is, but at the same time, and sometimes this other mode takes, you know, dominance over the world as is, as it could be, as it might have been, as it can become, and even as it will never be. You know, it is so important to imagine the impossible. I mean, your story was just beautiful, making this point. Imagining the impossible is one of the key drivers of possibility. So there is creativity, but there is much more into these phenomena. And this is my invitation to you in many ways to kind of enlarge our scope, which I'm sure, and I know many of us do. And in the room, we have people who study serendipity, you know, wonder, and many other phenomena. But to look at creativity within the bigger picture of how we engage with the possible, you know, that includes anticipation, pretense, wonder, imagination, and many other things. So there is intrinsically, I think, and I hope in my work, and I'm sure we share this, a recognition of the fact that we as human beings are agentic, future-oriented, and possibility-driven. So I'm not going to read this to you, you know, clearly doing just a little bit of research, we noticed that there is a wave of scholarship that is happening from many sides and many disciplines. This is not only in psychology. Actually, I didn't even put the many things that are happening in psychology with the matrix of maybe and many other topics, and homo prospectus, I think, or prospectivus. I have to revisit that title. But I noticed that in sociology, in anthropology, you know, in methodology, people start more and more to talk about how we need to focus not only on what's happening now, but the view towards the future, right? Appadurai said that in anthropology, we need imagination, anticipation, aspiration to become key concepts. Gergen, who's a psychologist, talked about how research should not only illuminate, but also create what is to become. And luckily we have a symposium a bit later that will talk more about research. So what is possibility studies? I took you on a very long route to come to this slide. It's an emerging interdisciplinary field of study that advances our theoretical and practical understanding of how individuals and collectives become aware of and explore new possibilities in the realm of the psychological, material, technological, social, cultural, and political. And I'm sure I've forgotten, I mean, the neurological will obviously be there. This is not only a social science and humanities enterprise, but because of my own positioning and the positioning of many colleagues I work with, of course, we're going to focus in priority, you know, on these aspects. So if we go back to our literature on creativity, there are so many key contributions to the field of possibility studies. I mean, one of them, very clearly, perhaps some of you thought already, possibility thinking. This has been an enormous concept in education, built up by late Professor Anna Croft and her collaborators. And it has always been a key inspiration for me, because what she did with this notion was to say that creativity happening in the classroom is relational. It's between the learner, the teacher, and the context. And it's not only in the mind, things happen in between these actors. People raise questions, we play, we take risks, we have self-determination. So what I really love about possibility thinking in the way it was formulated back then is that it brings together the psychological and the material. It's not only the mind and it's not only the student, it's the whole system. And Wendy Ross and I are working on a project to redefine and expand the notion of possibility thinking. So hopefully next Marconi we'll be talking about that. Of course, how could I forget, and I never do, Giovanni Corazza's dynamic definition that for me is really the core of possibility in so many ways, right? The word is not possible, it's potential, and we might talk about exactly, the differences and possibilities there. But this is exactly a possibilities angle on the topic of creativity for me, because it talks not only about creation as it happens and as it is, but creation as it can, as it drives us into the future. Creation that is indeterminate, that will always evolve. What is the purpose of creativity if it's not to lead to new creativity in many ways, to open up new possibilities? So I'm sure, Giovanni and you know his work, I'm not going to dwell on it more. And just to give a last example from Ron Baghetto and other colleagues, Machi and others, talking about uncertainty. Uncertainty becomes another key topic, and I'm sure some of you know in our discipline, and Ron is kind of pushing a lot the theory on that. And of course, let me do that again because it's very cool. Look, possibilities over there. I wasn't talking to Ron about possibility when he made up these schemas and all. And there is this wonderful study that I highly recommend, Gajda, Baghetto, and Karvovsky, that looks at classroom conversations and the space they create between, right, the indeterminate and the determinate. So in the classroom, when people ask questions, where do we drive the question? To a clear answer that closes the conversation. That's the answer. That's it. You got your information. Let's move on. With whatever we're doing. Or we leave some space for conversations to be indeterminate. I don't know exactly. You don't know. Maybe we can find out. Let's talk some more about this. I don't know where this conversation is going to go. How many teachers do that in the classroom? How many teachers allow themselves to create this space? I'm not guiding this. We can go anywhere with this topic. But in this study, it was shown that more creatively productive classrooms, they allow for this dynamic to happen, to kind of open up new possibilities and to invite uncertainty. Okay, so I'm going to finish in 3 minutes. So that's the invitation. That's it. I want to invite you to think of creativity as we do. Its processes, estimation, assessment, development, as part of a larger whole. I do firmly believe that we're going to see so much more if instead of looking at little branches, which we love doing and it's important to do, convergent thinking, divergent thinking, they're all there in the forest. But what is the forest? For me, at least, and I know for some of you here, it's possibility in many ways. We can call it differently if you react to the title, but it's really about discovering and enacting the possible. So there is a two-way conversation to be had here. On the one hand, we as creativity scholars can learn so much from related fields. And I've collaborated with Wendy Ross for a long while now. And when I came, to our collaboration, serendipity was just a word distant from me. And I was fascinated by all the work done on chance and accidents and, luck and all of that I never thought about. Even with my Easter egg project that has a lot of those things in it, I did not think of my work in those ways. So just talking to people who study serendipity, anticipation, future studies, counterfactual thinking, real utopias, the list can go on and on, can be extremely enriching for our theories. But we also give back. And I truly believe that we have some theories and models that if we were to talk to people who study, for instance, social change, why don't we talk more about creativity and social change? Because it's social change is more of a political, sociological topic. Creativity is a psychological topic. No, we have so much insight that I think we can bring to that conversation. So possibility studies basically invites us to connect. And this is where we have this logo that appeared on the slides as well. And thank you, Giovanni and the organizers. We have 19 partners at the moment. It's a network of networks. It's not a network of people, but networks are made of people. So it's a network of people in the end. So there is a website. I invite you, to look at it. And if you have a lab or a center where you believe, well, I would like to be involved in this project, please join us. We have an annual conference. It took place in May, was it? Feels like ages ago. And it's all online. You can see the talks there, and we hope to continue, obviously, with that. Dedicated social media, it's a fancy way of saying we have a YouTube channel, and we'll have Twitter. We will have Twitter, I've been told. And very new, we start a PhD. I mean, Wendy is leading this, a PhD reading group for advanced graduates, early postdocs, but kind of young scholars. One of the biggest and most rewarding experiences for me during my PhD was being part of a reading group. So we hope to pick this up around 15th of October. We're thinking of the first session. If you have people to recommend, or if you yourself, you might be a PhD student or recently graduated, do join us. We hope to have a continuous event with that. We also have the Encyclopedia of the Possible that is really coming up. It's been 3 years in the making. It feels like 3 years, and 250 entries. And I have in the room here, Serena, Sergio, Wendy. I'm sure I might be forgetting other people. Helped me a lot to put this together. It will be impressive, 250 entries. It's a big, big book. And we're closing, very soon. So if ever you get inspired, maybe you have a concept in your mind that it resonates with possibility, do get in touch with me, and we can still kind of slide in other topics. And finally, the very exciting news. This is really, it excites me so much because I have been trying to set up a kind of creativity possibility related journal for 7 years. And Sage, finally agreed. I mean, we didn't follow Sage through 7 years. There'll be a bit, yeah. But we will start in next year. We're going to start our Possibility Studies and Society journal. It's going to be a wonderful team. So I'm going to work with Wendy, with Sergio, with Isabella Lebuda, and obviously with many of you here in the room for the editorial board. And we hope to have many contributions from you. I mean, this is really exciting. It's something we can all shape together in terms of lead papers, special issues, thematic sections. So I'm here also to extend that invitation. And yeah, with that, I'm going to thank you very much. Thank you.
One question in the room.
What are some of the topics that you're still kind of open for December closing?
It's really, to give you an example, Robert Sternberg sent me an article and other colleagues on transformational creativity. And I thought, what is that concept about? And he has a whole model. And I thought, that's amazing, that connects. So it's really, it's terms, I mean, some of them, they jump out at you like imagination. Of course, we have an entry on imagination, but it might be something particular, a phenomenon you discovered in your work that you think that actually is a key concept that people should be more aware of. So these kind of topics, it might be a concept you constructed, because we don't want only, 19th century thinking in there. We want something new and fresh. So it could be something that you made, as a construct. So yeah, we talk about that. But over lunch, we do hope, and we'll have a symposium as well, but do find Wendy and I, and we'll be very happy to include you on the mailing list of the association and all of that.
Vlad, there is a question from the online audience.
Oh, yes. Hello. Hello. I'm so sorry. I've been yes. Hello.
From Michaela Tarano.
Uh-huh.
She asked,
yeah.
no,
I can't see,
okay.
Sadly, no.
Are you engaging in your studies of possibilities with the concepts from the adjacent possible?
Adjacent possible, yes, absolutely. That's an entry. Isn't that an entry in the encyclopedia? I'm going to sound like that for a number of years now. What, there is an entry there exactly on absolute adjacent possible is one of the big concepts. In a way, what I told you about Easter eggs is really about that. The adjacent possible that gets materialized on and on. So yeah, real utopias and everything, it really, we have some fascinating things that I learned from mathematics and philosophy, because this is really meant to be interdisciplinary. So we hope to bring more of that into it. Oh, and I forgot to mention Samantha Copeland, who's also part of the board with us, the philosopher.
Okay, last question.
Last question.
Which one? Here.
Giovanni. You can ask me a tricky question, isn't
Yeah.
it, Giovanni?
Not going to be a tricky question, but we're living very sad days looking at the international scene, and you know what I'm talking about.
Right.
So possibility is also connected with freedom, and taking away freedom also means to take away the possibility, for example, for women to do things that would normally they would do. So that is a connection I'm sure that you're going to explore.
Yeah, I think, I would hope that recent events and everything will feed into our thinking. I mean, there is a lot of possibility that happens within harsh constraints, and that's something, another interest of mine. Again, I really don't want to over romanticize, and it's not a thing to say the possible is always good. You can explore possibilities that lead you down very dark, narrow, bad paths. So I think we need to be aware of all of that, like we talk about malevolent creativity. But absolutely, the current context inspires us to rethink agency, to rethink possibility, and I hope we can do that together. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks again. Thanks
Thanks.
again.